it's an amazing thing, actually, to sort of.
Well, hello, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're watching this. Boy, that's a different way to open the show instead of just sitting around here talking about wondering if or not we are live streaming. I assume we're live streaming. We have a 30-second buffer there. Maybe you came in the middle of that. I don't know. We'll see when we play it back. But we have a really interesting, exciting, different, unique show tonight. First of all, you might have noticed it's if you're watching this live, it's Wednesday night. This is the first time we've done this Wednesday night. Usually we're at 9:30 in the morning. And the reason we're Wednesday night, I'm going to go solo my, if I can find my audio here, solo, there we go, is because of schedule trying to coordinate 4 very active filmmakers. We're going to do the making of Shot in the Dark, the Netflix new documentary series. And I found about this, I'm going to unmute this, you guys now. So I found out about this from my son, Max Braverman, who happens to be a sound mixer and musician. And he watched this show on Netflix and said, "Hey, Dad, you got to watch this show. It's all about what you used to do." And these guys, 1 or 2 of them might know that I used to do what they're doing now. But I'll tell them the whole story when we get on here. So before I introduce them, I just want to thank our sponsors very much. Pond 5, who's been very loyal from the beginning, of the world's largest source of video clips, some of which is crowdsourced. A lot is the library that they have. One of you guys' audio is squealing or squeaking back there, wiggling around. So, LumaForge are the filmmakers who are making hard drives now. I had a conversation with Jeff the other day about what kind of editing system they have. He should call up Sam or Patrick over at LumaForge and talk about what their jellyfish can do for them. And we have a new sponsor tonight, Momentous Insurance. A woman named Winnie Wong is my agent at Momentous, and I've used Winnie for many years for production insurance and E&O, and she's always there, and she's terrific. And we'll talk more about them in a little bit. But here are our guests for today. On the upper left, we have the director of the series, Jeff Daniels. And in the upper right, we have Tom Joka. Did I pronounce that right? Your last name, Tom?
No, Chuck, but it's okay. It's Jokai.
Jokai.
It's hard. Nobody pronounces it right.
Now let's see how I do with Howard. Raichbrook.
Yeah, pretty good.
Raichbrook,
yeah,
not
good.
bad. So Jeff is the director of this show. And Tom is one of the 3 cameramen that shot this. How many episodes was it? How many hours? 6?
8 episodes.
8
Yeah,
episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And Howard is one of the 3 major stringers that is featured in the show. And for those of you out there who don't know what a stringer is, I don't even know where they got the term. Maybe Howard knows where it comes from, but it's freelance cameramen. So when you turn on the news, especially in the morning, and you see that fire or that chase or that crash or that murder scene or somebody being rescued somewhere, and it happened at 2 o'clock in the morning, I can guarantee you that the local station didn't have a crew out there all night. It's guys like Howard and some of the other fellows that are in this show that are running around with the police and fire radios. And as I teased a little bit before, I don't think I told you, Howard, I actually supported myself through college for several years, way back when actually they were shooting on film. And I had a Bell and Howell and a Bolex and a 100-foot roll of film, silent film, and I had a battery-operated light on the side. Not that different than the light you have. And I would go...
That's incredible.
I had a fire radio and a police radio in my car. And I would get $25 for every story that they bought. And I wouldn't, and it was hard to do more than one station at a time because you couldn't make a file and upload it to different stations like you guys do. I had to do 100 feet of film, and then I had to shoot another 100 feet of film. And
that's crazy.
Sometimes,
I had no idea.
Think about that. So Jeff, let's.
I can't even imagine that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I almost feel bad for you, Chuck. Shooting film, exposing film out in the run.
Oh man, that's
on my own, and no headquarters to go back to and say, hey, give me some information. And I was competing against some other stringers that were out there, but my biggest competitor was a guy who worked for a newspaper that doesn't even exist anymore, a guy, the Herald Examiner, who was a big, huge guy who was kind of a mean SOB. And for some reason, and he wasn't even competitive with me because he was shooting stills and he was on staff and he was out at night. And for some reason, he just didn't like stringers out there, I guess. But I just stayed away from him. Jeff, tell us, how did this show come about? And
Sure.
What's the story behind this whole thing?
Fair question. I think originally it was probably about 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago now. Shannon and Howard had been kind of shopping around this idea, a little bit of a follow doc series, kind of following their work. And Howard had access, being a stringer himself out there at night, he had access to a couple of the other characters, the flavorful characters, if you will, that were out doing some of the same stuff. So they were the kind of the ones behind getting this thing kind of going. And fortunately, it came across my desk. And at that point, we kind of set out the first initial phase of the development, and which meant going out with Howard, going out with Zach, going out with Scott, even just kind of a little meet and greet, kind of a casting tape. So I spent a couple of nights doing a ride along with them out here in LA, just kind of getting a feel for the world, getting a feel for them, getting a feel for the business. We took all that footage and cut together a really sexy 5-minute trailer that was just kind of a little bit of an introduction to LA at night. I think we were originally fascinated with the underbelly of LA. I think that was one of the big draws at the time. Not looking at the city in the typical, beach and sunset and palm tree type situation, but to look at, the darker side, the things that are happening, the storylines that are happening in the middle of the night when everyone's asleep. We took that reel and we started pitching it around, and eventually we got some interest in it, and we were able to take it a step further and make a proper pilot. So we got a little bit of money together. We jumped back out there. We shot with Howard. We shot with Zach. We shot with Scott again, just to augment that footage. And we cut together a nice little pilot that had a beginning, middle, and end, a deep dive into their characters, if you will. And then once we had that in place, unfortunately, the network that got involved there actually ended up folding. They went out of business, and the project kicked back to us, which actually worked out, I think in the long run, a better deal, because we eventually got it in front of Netflix, and Netflix jumped on it, and they said, let's make it a series. And at that point, we started filming, and the rest is kind of history. At that point, we did 8 episodes. In the course of last year, we started filming the end of 2016, and we filmed right up till, I'd say, almost our last day was June 2017. And all the way up until that point, we were out there sporadically shooting, following these guys, doing some pickups, doing some B-roll, and cut together 8 episodes and put it up on Netflix.
So because I think if you haven't seen this show, or if you haven't seen the trailer, which is really great too, but if you haven't seen this show, maybe you don't understand why I was so excited about doing this episode. This is just a minute pull from maybe 2 minutes, 3 minutes into the first episode, and this clip is under 90 seconds. Let's take a look.
In the middle of the night, when everybody else goes to sleep, we're nocturnal. We document very bad things.
reason that people slow down and stare at crashes is kind of the reason that I have a job.
I film people's misery. I'm there at the worst time in their lives. And you never hope for someone to die, but it makes a better story. Competition is non-stop. We're all fighting for that one story of the night.
The television stations are not going to buy everyone's footage. They're going to pick one photographer who got there first, shot it better, got it in faster and more accurately than the others.
There are dollars to be made in this business, but if you don't get your stories on TV, you don't get the dollars. So you need to be bigger and better than your competition.
That's how you win the night. This job isn't for everyone. You have to be a little crazy.
It gets to you, but I wouldn't have it any other way.
I don't know. It's pretty amazing stuff for me. It looks like a feature film. As a matter of fact, I mean, I haven't seen Nightcrawler in a while, but I think this probably looks a hell of a lot better than Nightcrawler looked. I mean, just in this 1 minute and 25 seconds worth of stuff, you had fantastic shots. What about the drone stuff? I mean, when did you do the drone stuff?
I mean, I think that was always kind of built into the approach. You know, I think from the get-go, you know, we always wanted to kind of elevate as much as we could cinematically, you know, so it would be more of a docu-cinema. Yeah, so like every night, you know, we'd be out there, we'd kind of be trolling for stories. We'd have, you know, Howard and Zach and Scott all kind of rigged up and following them along. And then anytime a kind of a breaking story happened that we kind of knew could work in the piece, in the series, we would make sure we'd go back and get as much B-roll, as much, you know, additional photography to kind of help elevate any of those stories. So yeah, we shot like crazy. So if we weren't out filming or trolling for stories, we were out shooting some B-roll of the city, or shooting some drone shots of the city, you know, time and time again, just building that library so we can tap in throughout the course of the cut.
And Howard,
any of our shots.
Weren't you sort of responsible to some degree? Aren't you? You're credited as executive producer, and I think one of the creators of this show. What was your involvement?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, we originally had a show back on another network in 2008, 2009 called Stringers LA, and the kind of interest went away from that. Then we were contacted to be consultants on the Nightcrawler movie, just technical aspects of being a stringer. So that kind of pushed our job into the limelight again, and that really gave us a good positioning to explore this as a docuseries again. And that's when I started pitching it around with my business partner Shannon, and I met with the production company Cargo 7. And you know, we met with a lot of production companies, but we felt comfortable and really liked the way that Cargo 7 shot stuff. The look and feel of their previous projects blew us away. So we partnered with them, and then we went ahead with pitching the series. And then, you know, like Jeff said, it went to another network that eventually folded, but you know, we landed in the perfect place.
I think, by the way, Howard, your microphone is rubbing up against your shirt, and that's what's causing the static. If you could keep it away from the shirt, I think that would help. Thank you. Tom, what was it like for you being out there in the car, and was it sort of shocking at first, or, you know, I mean, I've seen you've got a lot of credits on a lot of different shows, but I'd love to know, what was it like being out there?
Well, for me, I had no idea the news was made like that at all. And Jeff never told me a thing about that. So that was definitely shocking. It was an eye-opening experience. The whole thing was very interesting. It was amazing.
What do you mean you didn't? What do you mean you didn't know the news was made? What, like what? How was? I
had no idea Stringers even existed. Like, I had no idea. I just thought they had a news crew out, and that's how it got done. I had no idea. And then I got on this show, and it was an eye-opening experience. but yeah, I learned a lot, which, I try to do on every project, but this one was definitely an eye opener. You get to see a lot of different things. I got to see Los Angeles at night. We went everywhere, places I've never even been to. It's a completely different world. So that was amazing. I mean, I'll never forget it. It was, like I said, an eye-opening experience. So it was great.
What about all the?
Are you looking at me, Jeff, like that?
I think it was one of those things where it's like, what was great about Tom is he already has a very cinematic eye. And this wasn't a kind of a typical show where you could just trust a person holding a camera in hope that you get the footage. I think we were in really difficult circumstances where, you had one camera to document, let's say Howard, as he jumps out of his car, goes to a call, and it all happens within 15 minutes. Howard can attest to this. The
Not
streamers
even
don't stay
15
there.
minutes. And Jeff never told me that
is
either.
luxury. Yeah, 15 minutes is luxury. So I kind of needed to rely on these guys who had a sense of story, but also had a very cinematic eye, who could feel comfortable and confident in their framing, in their composition, to kind of tell the story or follow the story as it unfolds in front of them. Make sure they get the cutaways that they kind of need for me to help build the scene. And so I think right away it was sort of like I brought Tom into the office up here and we started watching some of the original trailer and started watching some of the pieces. And I think he was falling in love with it right then and there. And then the first night out there, I probably put him in Scott's car, which is the wildest of all of them, and said, I'll see you back here at 4 a.m.
Didn't do it.
Scott
Didn't tell me anything.
Yeah.
Well, let's take another look at another clip, because I don't want to get through this show and not have these clips, and I think this is pretty amazing too. And this is, again, just from the first episode, so here we go. Short clip.
You need 5 things to do this job. You need a car, you need a camera, you need a phone, you need a computer, and you need some scanners and radios and shit like that. And the 6th thing I can't teach you or you can't buy, but it's called the hustle. You need the hustle. I cannot stress that enough. You don't have the hustle, go home.
Was it scary being in the car? I mean, it's sort of a funny question. I mean, you're a grown man, but men like to be in control. And if you're sitting there with a camera in the back seat or the front seat and somebody else is doing 90 miles an hour on the freeway,
I got one story in relation, and maybe Tom can attest to this too, because he's been out there. But yes, it is. The short answer is it's very scary. You're in the back seat, and half the time you're disoriented. You don't know where you are in the city. You don't know how close you are to a call, how far away you are. You don't know when a turn's coming up. You're sitting in the back seat trying to hold this camera steady, trying to concentrate on your frame, trying to make sure you get the kind of dialogue pieces out of it. But there was this one time. I mean, I guess, and Howard could probably relate to this too. You get after a certain degree, you probably get a little desensitized to it. And I remember this one call in particular. I was in the back of Scott's car, and it was a pursuit call. It never made the show, never made the piece, but it was a pursuit call. And it was about 3 a.m, and Scott was barreling down the highway at an excessive speed, and I was falling asleep in the back seat. My head started nodding a little bit, and I remember just having this kind of self-evaluation of like, wait a second, how am I falling asleep in this situation right now? But they're all really good drivers. They're all very experienced, and I personally didn't feel threatened, but it took a certain nerve for sure.
Sorry, somebody's static either. I'm sorry, Tom. Go ahead.
For me, I've done a lot of shooting. I've shot out of cars, done a lot of crazy shooting, a lot of crazy situations. But this one in particular was, and it, like what Jeff said, it's, you don't know, you look up and you're in Compton, and the next minute you're in downtown Los Angeles. You don't even know where you're at. You're shooting, like he said, like crazy. And then you're also talking to them. But I will say this, there was never a moment where I felt unsafe. I mean, these guys are professionals. They do it every night. I mean, they're really good at it. So it's like, even though it was all that, everything Jeff said, and it was crazy, and you get all that adrenaline's going, there was no time where I was like, oh, okay, I don't want to do this anymore because it's not safe. I have a wife and 2 kids. I would have gotten out of the car the first night and be like, I'm not doing this anymore, Jeff. But like I said, those guys are professionals. They do it every night. They're really, really, really good at it. Howard, don't let you know.
Thank you.
It's one
I
compliment I'm
appreciate
giving
that.
you, but they are really, really, they're really good at it, and they know what they're doing. And I mean, these guys know these streets like with their eyes closed, they can get anywhere.
Oh, my
It's
goodness.
crazy. I've never seen anybody like it, to be honest with you.
Let's talk just for a second about the geeky camera stuff, Howard. I was surprised, but not really surprised. But I it seemed to me like everybody was using JVC cameras. Am I right or wrong? Or at least most of the people. And why? Because JVC is not the go-to that you think of.
Yeah.
Right?
My backup camera is a JVC. I use a Sony PMW 300K1 as my main camera. I like that. It's just a low light camera. It's quick. I've never had any problems. I've dropped it. As far as JVC, I think that might be a Zach thing. I know he buys them for his guys. My brother does use a JVC. My twin brother, Austin, uses a Sony PMW. I know Scott uses a Sony PMW 300. Personally, I prefer Sony. As I said, my backup camera is a JVC. It's a good camera. It's just not as clear and doesn't work as well in low light as the Sony's, in my opinion.
I thought you were going to say that JVC is longer, and so it balances easier on your shoulder than the smaller little Sony cameras, which you have to kind of hold like this. But the JVC is more shoulder mounted, or no?
Yeah, I can see what you're saying. I have a shoulder mount for my Sony, so it balances pretty nicely. But I see what you're saying, yeah.
And the other thing that's kind of amazed me is that everybody out there, not only were you shooting, so you have to know how to shoot and you have to know how to get decent audio, but then you had a computer and you were editing in the car before you.
Yeah, I've never seen anything like that either, Chuck. It's crazy.
I mean, 15 years ago, we were dropping tape at the stations and making dubs, and after that, we had to go to a satellite station in West LA to feed out. So not only did you race for the story, you had to race to get to the satellite place first, because whoever fed the footage first would usually get the hits, as we call them. But now, yeah, it's technology. You have to keep up with technology. We can send a story out, edit it. It can be around the world in 15 minutes.
What is the technology that you're using? All right, so let's assume you have power and you can cut on a laptop in a car, which you do, obviously. But then how do you upload the file? Even a small file that's 2 or 3 minutes, on a normal hotspot phone. You don't use, a hotspot like this. You must have something that uploads a file much faster, don't you?
Well, we have consumer Wi-Fi hotspots in the cars. I mean, there was a good time where we had to kind of figure out quality versus time. So, we worked with the stations a lot, decided that what file size looks good and what bit rate we could use to make it look good and not make it look like VHS. I mean, some of the older stuff that would take forever to send would look like VHS by the time we'd compressed it and converted it to MPEG-2 back in the day. But now we create high-res MPEG-4s, usually a couple of 100 megabytes each. We know where the high-speed internet works best. I mean, there's places in downtown we know there's cross streets in West LA. We know where we get the highest speed uploads. So generally we can find a place very, very quickly and send, a 5-minute piece in a couple of minutes.
No, it's like a MiFi, just like a MiFi hotspot. It's nothing, no super.
Nope, it's a
space
MiFi thing. Yeah, there's no satellite technology involved or anything like that.
What are you cutting on the Premiere? What NLE are you using?
I actually use a program called Edius.
Wow.
It's like Premiere. I've used Premiere. I've used Final Cut. I've used everything in between. But Edius was recommended to me by a union camera guy who shoots for the stations. And it's very simple. We don't do anything. We don't add phase. We don't add graphics. We don't do anything like that. I mean, the most we do is we add color bars and tones at the front and maybe a slate to say this is Fire Hydro Crash, Beverly Hills, 2 a.m. And then RMG, my company, I don't know how the other companies do it, but we have our own video server. It's based on the East Coast, where we have a simple web uploader. You fill out like IPTC fields almost, cameraman, date, just brief story aspects, and we send that out, and it's all automated now. Once we send it out to our distribution list, it goes to all of the network's control rooms. They click download, they have their own login and password, and they download it, and we bill them. So it's actually pretty simple. It's streamlined. It took a while to get used to it, and we've spent a good few thousand on the video server itself, but it works great.
So do the other guys have the same? So you're not going directly to the station. You're going to a server first, and then you have to call the station and say, I have an XY story, and they have to download it, or do they just?
Well, what we do is we upload it, we fill out the captions, and it sits on our server. And then as soon as it's uploaded, we share via email. A lot of the control rooms at the stations have a direct email. So we send that to all the control rooms, producers, directors, news desk emails, tip emails to all the different stations, CBS, NBC, KTLA, Channel 7. We send it out to about 500 emails. And the bigger the story, we send it to networks as well. So it automatically distributes from our own video server directly via email with a link. They click the link, that takes them straight to our archive page. It's all broken down, categorized, keyworded. They have to log in, they have their own username and login. We can see who downloaded what at what time. So it's like I said, we spent a lot of money, but it's very streamlined. And
do you own the rights to all the film that you sell one time, or what? Who owns what after on a regular story?
Yeah, a regular story, we retain 100% copyright. It's all ours. They get to use it for 1 year, as much as they like. And there's no difference between any size of story. We could shoot a plane crash, we could shoot a hydrant crash, and they will pay the same, and they'll have the same rights for that. Where you make your money is the networks, like CNN or NBC Network. Then the price goes way up. But it has to be a story of national importance.
Well, speaking of that, that's a good transition to your fire story. Do you want to tell us about that? And I have that short clip.
Yeah, it was amazing. Honestly, you just never know what you're going to capture on tape. And I didn't know how fast this was going to explode, literally. So I'm filming the brush fires up in Ventura County before Christmas, the Thomas Fire, they called it. And I spent a few days up there. I got some pretty good stuff. It was one of the bigger fires I'd ever filmed. And I see this guy pull over on the side of the freeway, and he jumps out and he starts running around like he's crazy. So I didn't know what was going on. So I focused my camera on him. And then it dawned on me, he's chasing an animal. I first thought it was going to be his dog. I thought maybe he'd stopped to look at the fire, open his door, and a dog had got out.
Well, maybe you shouldn't spoil the whole story. Let's run the clip, and then you can tell us what happened.
Okay.
Here we go.
Yeah, he saved a rabbit.
And was it a nice Christmas present for you?
Yeah, you know what? It's funny because I had no idea that was just going to go to. Not only did that go to a national level, that went to an international level. My parents saw it in England. It was everywhere, and I continued my night, and I started getting phone calls, and it's like, man, I'm trying to do my job, but just give me a break. And I guess one of the networks bought it first. I think ABC Network bought it. They tweeted it out to their millions of followers, and it just went viral. It was incredible. I didn't get any sleep that night. And the funny thing was that story. I've been doing this a long time, and I've made some pretty decent money on some big stories. But to date, that story of that rabbit made me more money than I've ever made on any story ever. So I took a few weeks off over Christmas. It was a nice Christmas.
So how did it get syndicated where it made us that kind of, obviously, can you give us a clue as to what area we're talking about? Because I can tell you, like I said, I think I said earlier, I used to get $25 for a local story, and if it was a big network story, and which I did, I had network stories that I came across. It was $110 or $125. And then I never see the film again.
Yeah, so obviously local stations, they pay anywhere from $150 to $350, but there's a lot of local stations here. National stations pay between $500 and $1,000. Then you have the entertainment shows, like the Ellen Show and World's Most Amazing Videos. So over time, I'm in tens of thousands of dollars. We're not talking about $5,000, $10,000. We're talking about, a fair bit of money. Some people's yearly salary.
And do you do anything? Do you do anything with the footage after the fact, like stock footage? If somebody wants to use this in a show or a documentary, is it available, or do you have to go directly through you, or do you have somebody that you do?
No, we actually have a rep. We have a distribution rep in Miami. We have a lot of productions. We've done 108 half-hour episodes using exclusively RMG content. So it's the archive's not just sitting there. We own a lot of other archives too. So, we make money doing that too.
Tom, what kind of cameras were you using shooting, and what kind of what were you doing that was different or unique or special? Or you can tell us what your typical setup was there.
Yeah. So I was fortunate enough to come on this after Jeff had already shot his trailer, and I believe the pilot, a little bit of that maybe, and they already had a lot of it already dialed in. I just came in and maybe tweaked a couple things, got a couple new frames for them. But basically, the setup was we were shooting on C300s that's what I carried around. And then we would have 3, sometimes 4 mounted cameras on the car for every stringer that we were also in charge of. And then we'd also have a red that we would carry around. And that's where you see all that slow motion footage and all that stuff. So, and then we had a bunch of lenses, a whole lot to pick from, primes, zooms, you name it. But that's pretty much it. I mean, it was C300s and a red, and then a couple, I think, Jeff, what do we have? Those Blackmagic little Ice Cube cameras, maybe? I think we had one of those mounted in the car, and we had a C300 mounted, and we carried a C300 on us. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I think everything kind of revolved around that hood mount camera. I think that was, for us, that was kind of, I think, the cornerstone of the cinematic approach.
What was that camera?
And that was
the
Canon. Yeah, that was the Canon.
Yeah.
So we would mount that camera with suction cups to the hood of these guys' car and train them up to be comfortable with that, on the front of their car. And
which they were really good at. That didn't even bother them.
But when you pull up to a scene where there's some action going on or a lot of cops or something, you're running away from the camera car, and you've got like 3 cameras suction cupped onto the car and nobody watching the C300 that's sitting on the hood of the car?
Well, you cross your fingers and hope it's there when you get back.
Nobody believes me.
Exactly. It was really wild.
And so, did you remotely control on and off on the camera, or did you just turn, on the remote cameras, or were they just turned on and let them go, or what? I mean, there's some great sequence. The thing that really is mind-blowing about this show is how real it is, and yet the coverage is so amazing, And I think of the scene with Zach in the car when there are people going slower than he wants to go, and you've got the shot from the side, and you've got the shot from behind, and you've got 2 shots from in front of him, and you've got the helicopter shot, and you've got
Oh yeah. I mean, I think that worked in our favor. You know what I mean? Like, to have all that additional coverage, and to help be able to play with timing, tempo, and the edit and everything like that. So
I hate the term B-roll, but I must say the B-roll was just the icing on the cake here to such a great degree. So you didn't answer the question though. Were the cameras that were on the hood or outside, could you turn them on and off, or did you just turn them on and kind of walk away?
The mounted camera, C300, the mounted camera on the hood of the car, we ran a wire that we could control to stop and roll, and then the other cameras that were mounted on the inside were also remote controlled, and then everything was handheld. And this also too, Chuck, this is the first time I ever shot with a camera the way that we did. So literally all we had was a C300 and a lens and the lav mic, the transmitter, just Velcro to the top or bongo tied or however we did it. And that was it. And we this is how we're shooting.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No shotgun on the
shotgun mic, but there was no shoulder pad. There was no shoulder rig set up. It was we would try to make it as light as we could.
Zacuto is going to be very unhappy when they hear that.
Yes, they
Sorry,
are.
man. All their stuff's too heavy.
But what
but it
sort
was
of
fun.
to add to that,
you're able to get so much more that way. You know. Sorry, Jeff. But
no, it's all right. I mean, but to add to that, in some ways, like just like, and Howard says this a lot, like just like that, his car is his office. We kind of built the car out, that back seat out specifically to be sort of like a control room. And so we would strap a monitor to the back of the headrest of the passenger seat. And that monitor would be feeding footage from the hood mount camera. It'd be feeding footage from the side angle. It'd be feeding footage from the back camera that we'd mount over their shoulder every once in a while. So and then as an operator, you could sit in the back seat and you can look at the frame in the front, on the monitor right in front of you, and you could toggle those cameras on and off. Not every minute of the night are exciting things happening. Obviously, Howard can attest to this. A lot of this, a lot of their job is sitting in a parking spot and waiting. So we wouldn't be burning, tape or film back in your day, if you will. I would tell the guys, listen, sit there. If something pops up, you toggle those cameras and we're going. So they'd toggle those cameras, they'd all be rolling and they'd be off.
I'm still
so
amazed.
Was kind of built. Yeah.
I'm still amazed that you would get up and walk away from the car with $50,000 worth of cameras sitting on the car.
Yeah, in the middle of
That's
Compton.
the wildest thing, Chuck. I'm telling you, man. It's crazy. But here's the thing: we would pull up to a scene. It all happened so fast. And I'll tell you one story. The first thing I've ever did, the first thing I shot with them, I was with Scott. Jeff didn't tell me. Just brief description of the show. I watched a trailer, so I had an idea of what we were doing. The first scene we go to, he was in and out of the car so fast. All I got was a wide shot of him getting out, and then I'm like trying to change the lens, and he's already back in the car, and he's making fun of me. He's like, "What are you doing? We gotta go." I'm like, "What do you mean we gotta go? I didn't even shoot." I'm like,
"I just got here."
So it all happens so fast. You don't even have time. You don't have time to even think. You gotta just go. You gotta make sure you cross all your T's and dot all your I's with these guys because they're fast and they do it all the time. So it's tricky, but leaving the car there with all the camera stuff, it's not even. You don't even think of it. You gotta go and then
I loved also, beside the obvious B-roll and stuff, Jeff, the B-roll, the graphics that you had. Do you want to tell us how that came about? And then I have a short clip.
Absolutely. Yeah, the graphics, I think, were integral because, LA is so massive. In geographically speaking, the city is so spread out. I mean, we have upwards of over 5 million people here. With a lot of geography to cover, a lot of space. So we kind of wanted to give people, and because of the parallel stories that were happening, meaning, the narrative could be in Howard's car at one moment and jump over to Scott's car the next. And because we wanted to all feel like they were still on this game board, we came up with this idea of having a map as a go-to. And, it took a lot of iterations to kind of get that map finally to a spot that we felt like, helped tell the story and helped connect the dots, if you will.
Let's take a look at this clip, this short clip,
absolutely.
illustrating what you're saying.
Everybody has their idea of LA. For me, it was Baywatch. The sun, the sand, and the surf. Famous faces, see celebrities. But as a stringer, you know it completely differently. To us, LA is 508 miles of freeways, connecting 158 cities and 114 neighborhoods, and we cover all of it. Over by the beach on the west side is Santa Monica. For years, the police have encrypted their radios, which means we're never there. Up north is the San Fernando Valley, There's a lot of family homes there and huge wildfires in the summer. And then there's the wealthy Beverly Hills. If anything at all happens here, it's news. And smack in the middle is Hollywood. It's home to the Walk of Fame and the world-famous Hollywood sign. However, most of our stories are from over here, South Los Angeles, where the headlines are more often than not shootings and stabbings. And also downtown, where businesses mix with a vibrant nightlife and street dwellers. And there's also easy access to all the major freeways, so we can get anywhere within minutes.
I've never seen LA laid out so clearly, and I think any tourist that comes here should look at that clip to get an idea about how that doesn't even show you how big LA really is, because if you know, when you fly in from the East Coast, you know, it's the last half hour is wall to wall city, practically. But I think that was great. Now, you also told me that you had GPSs in the car, which is amazing. That A, that you thought of that. B, I'm sort of surprised because I assumed when I saw the maps and Howard is over here and someone else is over here and the accident and they're coming together. I thought you probably just made this all up after the fact. But tell me about what actually happened.
Well, again, because geography was so important to them, to their stories, to the show. It, also helps with the dramatic storytelling. Like if Howard's right there next to an accident, but Zach is close, it helps with them as they jockey to get to the story. But we, from the early stages, when I first did that ride along that I was talking about earlier with them, my biggest problem at the time of shooting that was the disorientation I felt in the back seat. So here I am trying to figure out the story or figure out where Howard's going, but I just couldn't tell where I was. And so to remedy that, we came up with this GPS design where we would basically log every night that we went out filming by putting a GPS little marker on their car. So when they'd come to the studio, we'd get them all kind of rigged up. We'd put the GPS marker on the car, and from that point on, their entire movements were recorded in this GPS tracker. And we would take that information afterwards, download it, synthesize it, and generate a really crude map of LA that would follow them in real time with the video picture that someone like Tom captured. So I could see Tom, I could see where, Tom's interviewing Howard maybe in the back seat, and I could see that they were over at La Cienega, cruising down over the hill. And we use that information to then reverse engineer some of those scenes. So we would get the additional B-roll of their car in location-specific areas. So if it is La Cienega and they're passing by some of the oil, structures, I would see it on their GPS map, and I'd go back to that same area and get a couple of B-roll shots of Howard's car zooming by up and down the street. And that way it kept the continuity between the lighting that's inside of them, between the color temperatures that are going on. It was for us, it was a big deal. And then we would obviously take that information afterwards and model our graphics around them.
Tell me one more time, how many nights of shooting roughly do you think there was, or over what period of time, or how many total days or something to give a clue as to how many days you shot? So if you had 3 crews every night or 4 crews? 3 crews every night. Then 3 crews every night. How many nights roughly?
It was sporadic. This wasn't a shoot where we could just go out and shoot it 4 weeks in a row and have all the content that we needed to cut something together. We sprinkled it over a period of time. We would do maybe 3 nights of verite work in a given week. And that started just before the year was over in November, and we sprinkled those shoot days all the way up till about April. And we had I'd say we had over 45 shoot days with that setup. But then in the meantime, Tommy and I would go out and shoot a night of B-roll. Those I wouldn't really count as shoot days, but we did a certain amount of those where we would go out and we would just shoot the city.
Did you find, as I'm sure Howard has some good stories, but did you find some of the nights that you didn't go out
Oh yeah.
all kinds of stuff was happening, and why weren't we there?
Yeah,
It was.
yeah. We call it the curse of the ride along. Anytime we've done any interviews or anything about Nightcrawler, the movie, or anything, we'd go out and we'd sit there and nothing would happen. And we warned them before, hey, it's the curse of the ride along. But we kind of planned it so we know what nights are busy just because we've done it for so long. Like a Thursday, Friday, and a Saturday night are the busiest. Like we're not going to plan to go out on a Sunday, Monday, and a Tuesday night. That wouldn't make sense. So we did most of our 3-day or 4-day shoots, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, over that period.
So there's a sequence at the end of the first episode, which is pretty amazing. And I know this is your brother who was
Austin, yeah.
who pulled over. To me, it didn't make any sense at all. I mean, I don't know what he was thinking. It was just a car that was pulled over in the side. But before I spoil it, let's take a look at it, and then we can discuss what it was.
Still gives me goosebumps.
I've watched it, a half a dozen times today, and I realized, I saw, whose camera was what, and I realized that your brother, without stopping, without thinking, that was, I guess, his camera on the handle, the door, and he just put the camera down in the car, and you cleverly left in editing that shot running for about a second to show that. And then who was the camera? Was it you, Tom, or was it someone else?
No, that was Big Clint. That was Clint.
So he went across the street. Yeah, but I mean, and then of course I don't want to give away too much in the show, but I know that had an incredible effect on your brother, and
it did, yeah. I mean, it still does today. I mean, it's not every day you get to see that stuff. I mean, we see a lot of things, of course, but to go from being a cameraman and an observer to somebody that actually saves this guy's life, it definitely affected him. And I knew instantly. I mean, this was real. This wasn't something for the show. It wasn't set up or anything like that. And he phones me, and I can tell instantly his voice is crackling and something's going on. Just an amazing amount of courage to do that. And he's got a couple of awards. He's got another one coming up, a huge award for doing that. So it's not many people would do that, but yeah, he put his camera down, stopped working, and turned into a rescuer.
So that sort of brings me around to Nightcrawler, which you were a consultant on, weren't you?
Mm-hmm.
What?
Yeah, we consulted, yeah.
And I haven't seen the movie recently. I saw it when it first came out. I'm a huge fan of Jake Gyllenhaal's, and I go see everything he's in. But it portrayed the Stringer as a sort of a creepy guy, to say the least, right? I don't know.
It did, and yeah, it did, and that's one of the concerns we had going into the Nightcrawler. It's like, okay, well, we're not creepy, but they wanted to allow some creative license to have this guy do some awful things.
And by contrast, there's the shot of your brother putting his camera down, which obviously, was the right thing to do.
Yeah,
But-
yeah. I mean, a lot of people
But-
certainly compare us to that movie, and he's gone a different way. So.
Well, guys, I want to say thanks very much for spending the time here. I really appreciate it. I think the show was so amazing. And if anybody's just tuning in late, it's called Shot in the Dark. It's currently on Netflix. It's a fantastic documentary series that these guys put together, and you deserve all congratulations and kudos for not only a very compelling story of people, making a living, but it's exciting and thrilling, and it's great documentary film work. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us again. I want to thank our sponsors again, Pond 5 and LumaForge and Momentous Insurance for making this possible. And please support them. I think we should probably run the crawl because I haven't thought about it now. But here's our credits, as limited as they are. And thanks very much for joining us. And we'll see you on 2 weeks on the next episode of Westdoc Online on April the 18th. Thanks so much. Goodbye.